The Ludendorff Bridge across the Rhine at Remagen. For 10 days it withstands aerial attacks and constant artillery fire while First Army troops exploit the initial breaching of the Rhine River line. Traffic in the face of the attacks must be kept to proper intervals between vehicles. A convoy of ponton equipment is ready to be unloaded for engineer battalions who begin construction despite the enemy raids. Normally a 34-hour job, the bridging operations are hours behind as Nazi fire flares up repeatedly.
Hello, today welcome to another episode of the Skinny Files. Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Remagen, or the Bridge at Remagen. This is a story that was not one of the war movies that was based on an actual event. They dramatized a lot of the characters, they dramatized a lot of things, but it is based on an actual event. On March 7, 1945, U.S. Army soldiers from the 9th Division crossed the Rhine River over the Ludendorff Bridge. And this is pivotal because up to that point, Germany in the West was fighting a very hard campaign to kind of stop the West, to buy time, to actually bring more armies from save more people from the Western armies so that they can have the Rhine as the last frontier. They could hold back and kind of hold back the tide from the Allies, and also try to buy time for all the soldiers fighting the Russians or the Soviets on the Eastern Front. They know that there is no quarter battle. This is going to be a very desperate battle. This is desperate hours. A lot of the crack German units of the 1940s are gone, right? Everything's left are kind of like called the Volkssturm or the Volksgrenadier, which is basically these units, the home guard from men who are too old or too young to fight. And they're trying to rally, or at least kind of build, but at the same time, there's still enough elite units like the SS, which are still there. A lot of the regular German armies are still functional, so that it's not like the end. It looks like the end, but there's the Germans still had a lot of fight in them. And this is where the movie begins. They are trying to capture one of the bridges over the Rhine, only to have it blown up in their face. And this unit, led by Hartmann and his NCO Sergeant Angel, they're the ones who now become the lead units. Now they're based on an actual unit, but Hollywood has dramatized them. And when they cross the bridge at Remagen or the Ludendorff, they're completely surprised that the bridge hasn't blown up. Meanwhile, at the same time, this movie also shows a lot of the Germans in a favorable light. They are sympathetic characters. They are trying to, stop the Allies from crossing all the bridges, and they're doing their best to rally whatever units they have nearby. Any disorganized units that are still not doing anything, but they can be rushed to defend the bridge. And you can see a lot of confusion, and you can see a lot of some of the feelings that they're looked at all the time. Like the SS is looking over their shoulders, the Gestapo's are looking at their shoulders. They're making sure that they're trying to enact Hitler's viewpoint that no single inch is to be given up. Hitler has as the old school. He doesn't really believe in mobile and tactical retreats with proper counterattacks just to save more time. And he just believes, no, you hold up your ground. And the German generals, who are a little bit wiser, like, well, sir, yeah, but we're going to lose the entire army, so we can't fight another day. So you have to kind of, and then you eventually find there are times when Hitler just relents and say, okay, you can pull back. Or sometimes they just pull back and don't even tell him. But you can see on the German side, there's just that tension that, look, we're not just fighting the Americans, we also have to deal with our own people. And you can see that tension that's been kind of maybe overplayed, but underplayed, but it is certainly there. That the tension that being they're always being watched. And for what they call defeatism, right? Defeatism is their term of this, like we just don't think you're fighting hard enough, and that can be a very hard charge to defeat in court. And a lot of the court martials that happened later were a lot of times where the decisions had already been made that yeah, these guys are guilty. Like there's no due process that we think of. You know, the those who fail to destroy the bridge before the Americans crossed it or are automatically guilty. It's just you can see how, and this happened in real life. And so when you watch the end of the movie, when you get to where uh, the surviving commanders are shot by the SS, and I'm not giving anything away because you have to watch the movie, uh, but you can see that yeah, it is. It's not a sense of I can't win this battle anyway. Now, with the one of the things that they don't show, or they show a little bit, is that this is one of the most interesting battles because this is one of the first uh, use of jet fighters and jet bombers, right? Because you know, think about how Germany had actually pioneered a lot of the first jets. They actually brought the British into production. They actually were the first to fly jet bombers. This is Arado 234, which you might see in the movies, but certainly in real life, they were the ones that actually flew the first sorties against the bridge. Once they realized that the bridge did not blow and now the Americans across it, now we had to counterattack with everything we had. And you can see a lot of not just that, but it was actually one of the first you can see attacks by the V2, the Western. This is the first ballistic missile ever flown. And that's kind of crazy because it's you didn't realize that hey, Germany's rolling out all of its wonder weapons or Wunderwaffe just to stop the Allies from crossing the bridge. Some of these weapons are just advanced and they're ahead of their times. Like no one's ever flown ballistic missiles, has never shot ballistic missiles ever before. No one's ever flown jet bombers before. Like even the United States with all the heavy bombers we have, they're all propeller jets. To have a Arado 234 stage an attack, however, ineffectual, it's kind of like you have no idea how the world has changed. Even 1945, we think kind of Korean War is the jet age. 1945, 44, 45 was already the beginning of the jet age, and it's kind of insane to see just how advanced Germany is at that time. The other thing as you watch this movie is I don't really like the stuff how they portrayed the army in the 1960s. And I'm kind of talking about that there. So that's kind of one of those things I would consider inaccurate about this movie. So what is accurate about this movie? Well, first of all, it was a hard fight because what happens is that to capture a bridge, you have to hold it from both ends, right? And actually, to defend the bridge, again, you have to hold it from both ends. You can't just have everything on the side, like the German side, and nothing on the other side. No, that's the correct way to defend a bridge is that you have to have defenses in front of the bridge as the enemy approaches it, such as perhaps a minefield if that's possible, or at least obstacles for vehicle obstacles like what they call HESCO barriers, but just concrete blocks. You might throw in some other debris that you scrounge out, like someone's broken down car, any kind of broken bridge. Then you would also have your machine gun nests. You want to just make sure that people, there's a good field of fire for, and then anything bigger, like what they call a pillbox, basically like this giant concrete 10-foot high container where you can hide more men and machine guns. And that's just on the far side. On the bridge itself, underneath it, you would have to do exactly what they did. They would have to put in the explosives just in case. Those would have to be near the central pillars, the central spans, any weak points that would just drop the bridge. And then at the far end, again, you would have more defenses. You would still have your more machine gun nests, more pillboxes, and just anything that just kind of looks down the bridge. And remember, the bridge, even though it's like 3, 4 lanes or 5, 6 across, it's still a narrow structure that it becomes a natural kill zone. And as enemy vehicles shoot by. You can put in, small anti-tank teams with like bazookas or Panzerfaust. You can do just anything to kind of stop the tanks where they are. And as the enemy piles up, it just becomes more and more obstacles to kind of cross the bridge as it is. And the Germans were trying to do everything right. They also had to put you know anti-aircraft guns on both ends, just that the Allies cannot fly air cover to kind of cover their attacks. It's just a lot of defenses that are completely layered. It's not like, oh, I just have a barrier here, some anti-tanks squads here. It's no, it's a very involved defense. The problem with the Germans, which is true, was that they didn't not have enough explosives, or they had the wrong type of explosives. They had only civilian grade explosives, which are kind of like the type of explosives you use to dynamite a hill to quarry stone. It's not like industrial grade military stuff that you can blow a bridge and a tank in half. And the Germans basically had to put everything they had on that bridge. So this is a one shot. Like if we didn't have enough blast, well, we might weaken the bridge. So that's kind of the second place. Like if you can't blow the bridge, at least weaken it. Because bridges have to be rated for vehicle traffic. And if you have a 30-ton tank, 40-ton tank trying to cross of it, sure, one of them's okay. But if you don't forget, this is an armored unit. So if you have 20 tanks crossing it at once, 30 tank crossing stuff, and if the bridge is not rated for it, then no, you can't have that. It's not rated for all the heavy equipment, heavy vehicles, then you can't cross the bridge. So that's another problem. So again, that's if you can't blow the bridge, at least makes it unusable for heavy equipment and heavy vehicles. And if that doesn't work, well, then now you have trouble. Because now you can't do it yourself, then you have to call in the artillery, you have to call in the heavy bombers, you have to kind of even throw the missiles at it, just drop the bridge yourself. But then that takes a while because again, you have to load in the bombs, and bombs have to hit the bridge exactly where it's supposed to do, and then it can be the missiles have to hit it, you have to aim it, target it. Yeah, I mean it's doable, but it just takes more time. It's better than the best case scenario has always been blow the bridge once with the first time with the right amount of explosives, with the right type of explosives. And once the Allies cross it, you see in the movies, and also there's a lot of other things they kind of took liberties with it. For example, some of the light tanks, they act as like a flying column. Their guns are not strong enough to kind of destroy other tanks. They're just kind of there to the M24 Chaffee tanks or Chaffee tanks you see the being movies are just kind of like, no, they're just light tanks. They're not mobile artillery. They're just light tanks. Some of the tanks that they should have used, this is by now, this is about 20 years later. Some of the tanks which have been the more advanced tanks, more historically accurate tanks, like the Pershing tank, just were not available in that numbers, right? And maybe again, a lot of them were scrapped, a lot of them became converted. Maybe a handful became part of a museum, especially like an armor museum, like the ones at Fort Knox, the Imperial War Museum. Again, you go from 3,000 tanks ever made to just a handful that exists in private collections and museums. Like you can't roll them up for the movies anymore. So you have to kind of use what's available. You have to ask neighboring armies, hey, can you send a couple hundred army soldiers over as extras, which they did in Saving Private Ryan. Now, this was kind of one of the interesting ones because they filmed this in Czechoslovakia not been that Czechoslovakia in 1969 or 68, 69. And this is going to be interesting because this is during the Cold War where I guess you could say attitudes towards armies have kind of evolved. We'll talk about that a little bit more as you get to the historical analysis. Now, in the movies, again, there's a lot of random stuff. You can just kind of see there's little love stories. They're stuck in various French and German villages. They're kind of like they're kind of looting if they can, but Well, I mean, also just kind of back then, kind of if they were souvenir hunters, they might say, "Oh, hey, here's some dead Germans watch. I'll take that." Or here's some dead officers a pistol, like you see in Hubler. Hubler and Banner Brothers is always looking for a German Luger to as a war prize um, souvenir, and that's that. Yeah, I mean, you call it thievery, stealing, but it's kind of looting is kind of in this very gray matters where everyone does it. It's kind of ironic that they would call one of the final campaigns over the Rhine Operation Plunder. And again, that's one of those odd things. Maybe sometimes it's one of those code names are just came up because that's the gen word. But then when you actually start plundering people in real life as opposed to operation, it's because this weird history and code names becoming just coming together. The when you get to the Germans, again, there's also back and forth as they're trying to figure out, well, great, what do we do now? Because now what you see in the British American, you see at a very tactical level. This is this company infantry platoon company that was just caught in the crossfire as they're trying to fight their way across the bridge. They are doing that. But if you, as you read the history of the story, you can see, especially you look at the Wikipedia entry or the books that the movie's based on, you're going to see there's more strategic levels of decisions that go beyond that. So that's why when you watch some of the movies like The Longest Day, yeah, you can see at the ground level. But then you watch some other movies like Patton, you see it at the higher division and even corps and army levels. And so the understanding of the focus of the entries and your research is just like, wait, so you're watching a movie at the company level, but then you read the book as it's at the strategic level, and you can see the disparity is like, well, there's a lot more details. Why didn't you put that in the movie? Well, the movie's told from that level, the platoon and company level. Finally, I want to talk about the general attitudes watching movies from the 60s. Well, I don't know if people realize that more movies made from the 60s are very different from the one was made in the early, mid 40s, because there were war movies that were made even during the war was still going on. You had war movies made in the 50s, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, up to today. And what happens is that one thing is I have a cringe uh, factor from the 60s that they actually, especially ones in the later ones and early 70s, they started bringing in some of the attitudes of the time so that some of the war movies from the late 60s and early 70s become not just war movies, but anti-war movies. Why? There were two major wars going on at the same time. Well, first, obviously Vietnam, and obviously the Cold War, and the tensions, especially how Americans and American filmmakers started having either consciously or unconsciously bringing in attitudes. For example, you see um, more cases of resisting authority or just talking back to officers. I mean, generally, yeah, yes, there's always be some dialogue, but then the attitude are just like, I don't even like you, right? I don't even respect you at all. I'm just gonna do my side things. When you watch some scenes from the Battle of Bulge, other ones like Kelly's Heroes, is certainly there's a lot of characters are just anti-authority, and that kind of came out after in the what was going on in American civilian society was like that. So you see a lot of the things kind of work their ways in. I don't agree with it. But at the same time, that's the movie's story, the Hollywood director's decision, and the script writers kind of put the more anti-authority messages in those movies. Uh, you can see that in the movies for the German side, again, there's also sense of yeah, the higher authorities tell us to hold our ground and destroy the bridge, but at the same time, they also realized that they need to save as many German units still trapped on the other side of the Rhine. And so there's also that sense of humanity there that is kind of makes the not the Germans a little more human in that way. When you look at uh, the ending, the two, one of them who was thought lost as they were assaulting this barge, the two men, the two American soldiers, yeah, they're still friends, which is awesome. But again, you see some of the things that in Band of Brothers where Winters has told Compton, like, don't get too close to the men. You're an officer, you're a leader, don't get too close to the enlisted. And that bond you can see in Bridge and Remagen, and you can see in Band of Brothers, you can see that, yeah, there is a reason why officers and enlisted don't always get shouldn't always be friends. And you can see how hard that Hartman, who's based on a natural American infantry officer named Timmerman, who wasn't the first to lead the units, that's how he felt when he realized, yeah, his friend who was supposed to be MIA is now alive. So that's kind of one of those things where you can see the kind of the 60s, that some of the values working their way in, questions of authority, questions of friendship, whether we should be fighting war. And now one of the interesting things is a lot of these movies was actually filmed in Czechoslovakia, which is at that point in 68, 69 was still an enemy. And they were still going after some problems of their own. They still had they had just gone through the Prague Spring, which is this revolt, and Czechoslovakia kind of almost got some more signs of independence until the other Warsaw Pact countries rolled in, kind of just ended their revolution, you could say. And there's a lot of tensions there too, because, well, why are you allowing Westerners to depict an army to film in your country right after this tumultuous event? So that's kind of where one of the interesting things, how all that background comes in. Now, the way that I was kind of told, it's kind of this very critical event, and yet it's kind of this very underrated movie. I think so, but at the same time, some of the reviewers didn't like it too. According to my research, someone only rated 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. Give it what you will. Some more movies are just a lot more underrated. Others are like, no, this is one of the best ones. And Bridge of Remagen is not one of the best ones. It is lesser known. So maybe it's one of those catch-22s. It's not well known, therefore it's not good. But it can be good, but not well known. So it's one of those catch-22s. That's it for me for the Skinny Files for Bridge of Remagen. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.
Under heavy enemy fire, combat engineers out on the incompleted span dash back to shore. Despite these attacks, the first ponton bridge is completed and handling heavy traffic on 14th March. Armor is raced across the new link as the Remagen bridgehead begins expanding into a wide front. Both the ponton span and the adjacent Ludendorff Bridge are still under enemy fire. The engineer battalion working on the Ludendorff strengthens the roadbed, which was improvised to allow vehicles to travel over the railway ties. Damaged structural members of the bridge are removed by engineers. But weakened by the cumulative damage, the Ludendorff collapses on 17th March while about 300 engineer troops are working on it. Many of them are hurled into the swift icy water or crushed by the falling structure.